Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to U.S. Representative from District 13, Congressman Charlie Crist. Charlie, good to see you. Can I call you Charlie? I should call you Governor, Education Commissioner. I mean, what,
You should call me Charlie, please. I've been called a lot worse, Al, and known you a long time and really appreciate your friendship and your professionalism.
So we have a race now that you're running against a newcomer, Anna Paulina Luna. When people judge you, how should they judge you? Should they judge you on what Charlie Crist does as Charlie Crist, or should they judge you as Charlie Crist, a Democrat running as a Democrat in a democratically controlled House?
Well, I hope people judge me as Charlie Crist, who grew up in St. Petersburg. You know, Al, I was born in Pennsylvania, but moved to St. Pete with my family when I was 3 years old. I went to Bay Vista Elementary on the south side. Then I went to Bay Point Junior High, which they were called then instead of middle school. We moved to the north side of town, so I finished junior high school at Riviera, and then I went to St. Petersburg High. Graduated there in 1974, started out at Wake Forest University, was a walk-on quarterback there. We didn't do too well, and I only played junior varsity. But I miss Florida so much, Al, I transferred back to Florida State University, majoring in government, minoring in education, and really enjoyed FSU. Then got my law degree up in Birmingham, Alabama, and came back to St. Pete. My first job, I worked for professional baseball, the minor league division of the baseball commissioner's office. It was like a dream come true to combine law and sports, and really enjoyed it. And I love St. Pete. You can't beat St. Pete, and Pinellas County is incredible. And it's always great to be home.
Well, I've always enjoyed interviewing with you, Charlie, and you know, we've been around the block together in a way, because I was telling a lot of people about C.W. Bill Young, and a lot of people, believe it or not, don't remember who he was, and that was the seat that you guys took over. And so let me get back to this. So you got a presidential election, and oftentimes what happens is that even on a local level, the voting is considered to be, or interpreted as, well, this is a seal of approval for the person that's in office, or this was an absolute revolt vote to make sure that person got out of the office. And I always wonder for local politicians, because you're local but you're up in DC, how fair that is.
Well, I don't know if it's fair or unfair. I think what's important is that each election stands on its own, frankly. And Floridians have been very discerning about who they end up voting for, no matter what race it might be. I mean, you know, I've run statewide several times, obviously, education commissioner, attorney general, governor, and Floridians are very smart and well-informed voters, I believe. And so they'll look at who the candidates are for president. They'll look at who the candidates are for U.S. Senate or Congress. And I think they make their own decisions based on trust and who they feel they can believe in, and somebody they think is genuine and really looks out for their best interest first. And I've always strived to do that.
So I'm very curious too, because the COVID thing, which as a journalist sitting back and watching all the coverage, which is in a way, I'm glad I'm retired, I'll just say that right now, is that you look at all of the confusion that's caused by that, and we get this whole states' rights versus federal rights. And I think all of this stuff has gotten so clouded in the political buzz on both sides that what you tended to have brought to the offices that you were in was common sense. Now, I know that a number of years ago, you were trying to put together a coalition of Republicans and Democrats that tried to put together common sense legislation. What happened to common sense?
Well, we don't have enough of it now. And I think everybody in our country recognizes that right now. It's a real frustration for folks. And I get that. I understand it. You know, what you need to be focused on is not what's right versus left, but frankly, what is right versus wrong. It makes the decision making that much easier, Al, always has for me, whether it was, you know, to restore rights for former felons who had not committed violent acts, making sure that we had the necessary resources for our school teachers and education, you know, from K through 12 to higher ed, making sure that we protected our environment, made sure oil drilling could not happen off the coast of Florida, which I've sponsored with Kathy Castor, my dear colleague from the other side of Tampa Bay. And, you know, these are, I think, basic fundamental things. You know, we all want to have a good upbringing for our children, a good education for them, a good environment for them to grow up in, one that's healthy and safe. And that's, you know, stick with the common sense fundamentals, and it's hard to go wrong.
Let's talk about mass transit. Again, having been in this area since '86, you know how frustrating this whole thing has been. Of all of the giant metro areas that are out there, one of the lacking areas that Tampa Bay has consistently is mass transit. The ferry idea, good idea, bad idea to continue to fund it, even though monetarily it doesn't pay for itself?
I think it's a good idea. You know, my point of view is, Al, you know, living in St. Pete and driving over to Tampa occasionally and going up to Clearwater or Largo or St. Pete Beach, having the opportunity to get to those places with mass transit is a wonderful opportunity. It's why I pushed very hard this year, and we were successful in getting over $21 million for the new Sunrunner mass transit from St. Pete to St. Pete Beach.
Right.
I think that's a big win for the area. But in addition to that, I serve on the Appropriations Committee. That's a committee that doles out the money, the hard-earned taxpayer money that we have in Washington. And we were able to get, like $107 billion to tackle construction routes and congestion routes like US 19. That's always been a difficult point. And you mentioned him earlier, but I'm going to give him more credit too, is Congressman Bill Young, who actually was my father's patient. My dad practiced medicine as a family doctor for 55 years. And I'm going to tell you a story about him. He did something very special for our family that he did for all his constituents. But he worked on back to US 19 a lot. But to Bill Young and his common sense approach, I have his picture in my Washington office because I have that much respect for him. And
so Charlie, what's it going to take to get back to that? Because here's what happens. The expectations from the public are so high. And then I think that very wrongly, we tend to believe, whether it's Republican or Democrat, that who's ever president is going to solve all these problems like that, which I hate to say it, but that it doesn't happen that way.
No, and Al, I learned that as governor. When you're the chief executive of a state as big as Florida, now the third largest state in the country, you understand that as governor or as president of the country instead of governor of Florida, that you have to work with others to get things done. And I always did that as your governor, for the 4 years that I was honored to hold that office, and work with Republicans, work with Democrats, work with independents, anybody who was willing to help us, get the, ethics right, education right, protect our environment, the basic fundamentals of blocking and tackling for our fellow Floridians. And, our fellow Floridians and Pinellas County residents, in my case, they're my boss. And I respond to them. And, I'm very proud, since I've been in office since 2017 in Congress, we've got over $2 million for veterans who needed those benefits, were unable to get them before we stepped in on their behalf. Things like that are so important to people. So
here's a little philosophical thing that I think that voters are thinking about. When it came to the COVID response, and a lot of finger pointing, and I'm not going to get into that, what I want to get into is it the responsibility of the state, or is the responsibility of the federal government to have all these supplies that, and again, not pointing the finger, should have been stockpiled and should have been ready in case this thing kind of happened? Whose responsibility is that? Is that a states' rights issue? Is that a federal rights issue? What? It's
an American issue. It's all hands on deck. We are in an American crisis right now dealing with this pandemic. And it's not just a health crisis, it's also an economic crisis, as we as Floridians probably experience more than any other place. I mean, we depend on tourism now. And if people don't feel that they can travel safely, they're not going to come to our beautiful state, the sunshine state of Florida. And so all of us need to work together, state, local, and federal, to do everything we possibly can. And I'm very proud of the Pinellas County Commission. They have done extraordinary things to contribute to helping and aiding in this COVID.
But should the state have to have their own stockpile ready to go just in case these things happen?
Of course.
Okay.
Everybody should be prepared. We as Floridians should know that more than anybody else.
Right.
When I was Attorney General, we had 5, 6, 7 hurricanes, and, Governor Bush did a great job. When I was governor, we didn't have any hurricanes, by the grace of God, but you always have to be prepared, whether it's a hurricane, a health crisis like we're facing now, or, dovetailing with an economic crisis too. That's why passing the CARES Act, $3 trillion of help, Americans helping Americans, is what the Congress did. And the House, I'm proud to say, passed another stimulus, another $3 trillion, in the HEROES Act. The Senate has not acted, sadly, but I'm an optimist, Al. I always have been. I'm pretty confident they're going to come through before too much longer. The American people deserve it. They need extended unemployment compensation. They need another stimulus check. Basically, they need help, and they need somebody who cares about them. And that's the job of a true public servant.
And one other item before we get out of here, because I think we've talked about this a lot. Why don't we just have a national ID so that everybody could vote however they wanted to, and the vote would be traceable? Because that's the whole issue. Florida, as you know, has mail-ins, absentees. They're kind of the same thing now. But this approach of just sending things out that you can't verify, we kind of learned our lesson with the electronic machines because we couldn't walk backwards to verify. Is it time for that, you think?
You make an excellent point. And again, going back to my days as governor, working with then U.S. Representative Robert Wexler, he encouraged me and persuaded me to have paper ballots. Because you're right, we had the electronic machines we couldn't trace, as you're talking about, and check and verify. But when we went to the paper ballots again, we had that opportunity again in Florida. And I didn't want Florida, our beautiful Florida, to be embarrassed again, like it was in the 2000 race. What was it, 537 votes or whatever it was between Bush and Gore? You know, but listen, so now we have that. We can trace it. I think Florida has met that responsibility. And the most important thing you talked about is what you just raised, the issue of voting and voting this year in what I believe is the most important election of our lives. People I know say that all the time, but this time I believe it really is. And you can vote by mail. Those mail ballots go out the end of this month, and then you can vote early, or you can vote on election day. But what's most important is to vote and exercise that precious, cherished right we have as Americans.
Boy, how many times when I was on the air did I tell people that? And I'm still preaching to people to get out and vote.
Yes,
U.S.
you are.
Representative from District 13, Congressman Charlie Crist, always good talking to you. Good luck in the election, and let's not be strangers, okay?
Thank you, Al.